freely, the British, who were going through the Industrial Revolution, would buy it. So they also had economic reasons. They said, we don't like this mercantilism, we want free trade because we'll get more money. So they had political and economic reasons. PE, right? It's like gym class. Those things will help you remember, by the way. If you need help, sometimes that helps to think of like acronyms, and the sillier the better. Now, the government will attempt to censor these ideas, but the Latin American people will be inspired by the American revolutions and the French revolutions. They're going to say, the Latin Americans say, well, look, it can be done, right? The French did it, the Americans did it, so we can do it too. And during the Napoleonic Wars, Spain will actually be conquered, and that's going to say, well, hey, Spain is conquered, Spain is weak, we can help rise up against Spain. And so that's what they're going to do. Now, the guy, remember, who's in charge of much of this is this man, Simon Bolivar. Simon Bolivar. And Simon Bolivar is going to be, they talk about him as the liberator. He's the one who's going to help win freedom, win independence for all these different Latin American countries. So that's key. The problem is, remember, he's different from Washington. He doesn't believe in liberty. He's the guy that says the fellow citizens are not ready. Latin Americans are not ready for democracy, so we need caudillos, we need dictators. Right? Latin American society, he says, is not ready for democracy. We need a powerful dictator, a powerful person to hold society together. Now, the reason, though, that you have, the reason that he sees this need for this is because there's divisions within society. Latin American society, remember I drew a picture of it, but it's kind of this pyramid shape, where you have just a few very wealthy people on top, and a large number, you have a few middle people, but you have a very large number of poor people. If you brought democracy, the poor people would vote so they could get some of the wealth of the powerful people, right? They would have votes and so forth to get some more power. So that's why he doesn't want to bring in democracy, because it would mean that these people would lose power. They would lose some of their wealth. Remember, Simon Bolivar owns a lot of haciendas. He owns a lot of estates. That's what hacienda means, by the way. There's a hacienda restaurant here. It's referring to a large agricultural estate. So you have this society in which there's few wealthy, there's many more people. They're not allowed to vote. These poor people don't get a vote. And that means that if they want change, they have to do it violently. They have to bring change through rebellion, through revolt. That leads to instability. Right? So this is going to lead to instability in Latin America, because the people on top aren't willing to share their wealth and their power with the people down here, so this causes these people to be willing to revolt. And so this also, remember, one thing I've been trying to emphasize is democracy and nationalism bring you power. You can't have, these people don't want democracy, right? And they're not able to bring in nationalism because they're not able to unify the people because of these divisions in society, so these countries will be weaker. Right? They don't accept democracy, they don't accept nationalism, it's going to make them weaker, and also they're going to be unstable because of that. The United States in North America is going to be different, right? And I showed you that video about the thing called property owning democracy. Remember, they gave the example of South Carolina. Land, if you came to South America, you could come as a poor person to North America, and if you, as an indentured servant, and if you survived your period of indenture, you'd be given land. And you would be given enough land to give you the right to vote. So the American system is going to look more like this. You're still going to have a few very rich people, and you're going to have some very poor people, but you're going to have a lot more people who have some money and wealth. And those people will have democracy. Those people will have a say in their government. And so they're going to be willing to support that government. They're going to be willing to sacrifice for that government because they have a say in that government. That's going to lead to stability. The United States will be a much more stable country. This doesn't always work, right? The Civil War, American Civil War is an example when the system breaks down. But for the most part, because wealth and political power are shared, people are largely happy with the government, are willing to support it, and you have stability. That allows for the development of democracy and nationalism, and that's going to help make the United States very, very powerful. In addition, one thing we just want to emphasize about the United States is that it's a very large country. It's much larger than any single European country, with the exception of Russia. And you can see this, I gave you these statistics, right? 1800, 1860, the United States is going to become huge, right? By 1860, it's going to have a larger population than Britain. And it's a larger place. So that means Americans, they have the power of Britain. Britain becomes powerful through democracy, nationalism, the Industrial Revolution. The United States will do the same thing. But the United States is bigger than Britain. It has more people, and it has more natural resources. So the United States will become a bigger industrial power than Britain. We're able to adopt the political changes that made Britain powerful and the economic changes that made Britain powerful, but we have more stuff and we have more people. So we're going to become even bigger and more powerful than them. And in particular, I gave you this example of the second industrial revolution. And what's important about this, I gave you the name of four, they're not the only four inventors, but four very important inventors from this second industrial revolution: Thomas Edison, Alexander Graham Bell, Marconi, and Henry Ford. All of them, but Marconi, are Americans. So Americans in the second industrial revolution are going to be on the cutting edge. We're not going to be borrowing from Britain. We're going to be advanced enough that we're able to make advances and discoveries on our own. Okay, that was the third question. Why was the United States able to become a greater industrial power? So that was a lot of information. Any questions on that before we move on? Okay. How did the Spanish-American War both unite and divide Americans? And how did Americans view Cubans, and how did this influence how Americans treated them? So I'm going to treat those two questions together. Okay, this is a newspaper that I showed you, and it says the spirit of war pervades the breast of all Americans. So it's many people are going to be willing to sacrifice and join up in the Spanish-American War. I can't remember the exact numbers, but when the United States asked for volunteers, remember, twice as many people volunteered as were needed. That doesn't usually happen, right? And I showed you this image to kind of give us an idea here. And these are things that will hopefully, if I show an image, especially when we analyze it in class, it's meant to help you kind of understand the concept better. And what does this image represent? Or who are these two guys? Right, exactly. North and South are uniting. Right, so this is an image of unity. These people who were separated are being united. Right, and they're being united by their desire to free Cuba, to liberate Cuba. So the old ideas of American democracy and liberalism, nationalism, so forth, are coming together to overcome the wounds of the Civil War and unite Americans. Now, real quick, is this uniting all Americans? Right? What race are these guys? White. They're white. Right? Remember, African Americans will be divided by the war. Right? Remember, some African Americans, so white Americans are largely united by the war. But African Americans, some are going to say, yeah, we should fight too. We're nationalists, we're patriots too. This is our country. We want to we want to fight on behalf of the United States. And also, if we fight, maybe people will respect us more and we'll get equal rights. And then other African Americans disagreed and said, we can't talk about spreading liberty and freedom to Cuba if we don't have liberty at home. Right? If we don't have liberty at home, how can we spread that to Cuba? So that was an example. So then, and one thing also, you notice there, Cuba is portrayed as a young girl. Cuba here is portrayed as a young boy. So there was this tendency among Americans to see the Cubans positively, to say we should, the Cubans are people who need us, they're good people, but also in a sense to see them as children, as people who need our guidance, not as fully mature people, good people, but not fully mature people who need us to help them. And so that's important because that influences how Americans act in the Cuban War for independence, in the Spanish-American War. Many Americans will, even though we're pro-Cuban, we want Cuba to be independent, we also say, okay, Cuba, we need to guide you now that you're independent. So even though Cuba becomes an independent country, and Cuba does indeed become an independent country, the United States has a military base there, still does to this day, and also the United States had the right to intervene in Cuban politics if the Cubans asked us to. So that's something, it caused Americans to kind of, even though we recognize Cuba as an independent country, we wanted influence, we wanted to be able to interfere there. So it was kind of a limited independence. Okay, we had this question, why did some Americans support keeping the Philippines an American colony? Why did some oppose? So you can see that, I just had the list here, right? It would make America wealthy. It would help our military because we could have some bases there to strengthen our power in the Pacific. We had the duty of extending Christian civilization. We wanted to prove we were as good as Europe. They had colonies, so we should too. And it looks bad if we don't agree to it because the president said he would agree to it. Congress should support him. People who said we shouldn't keep the Philippines said the Constitution doesn't allow us to do this. The United States was a former colony that had won its freedom. So why should we get colonies, right? We were once a colony, these people, and we wanted freedom. These people are a colony, they want freedom. Why should we take them over? It threatens our democracy, right? Empires are hierarchical. You are governing other people, and it's not equal. But democracy is supposed to have ideas of equality. And we don't want these non-white people as part of the United States. They're alien people. They'll weaken our country if we allow them in there. So there's kind of, I think these are three good reasons. This is kind of, this is just racism right here. So that's something to, so those are the reasons. One thing I should point out, the United States was not afraid of Spain, right? There was no like, okay, hey, if we take the Philippines, the Spanish will want to get it back. There was no way. The Spanish were not nearly powerful enough to do that. So that would be an example of a false answer. What were social Darwinism and eugenics? Okay. Charles Darwin, first of all, right up there, he's a term. Now, Darwin, similar to Galileo and similar to Marx, is someone who represents the importance of science. Right? He's connected with science. And like Galileo and Marx, he's challenging old worldviews with new science. Right? Marx is challenging these ideas of capitalism and democracy and so forth. Or liberalism, I should say, capitalism and liberalism. Galileo's challenging this old idea of how the universe works. Charles Darwin is challenging where human beings come from. So he's challenging also, similar to Galileo, kind of religious ideas to a largest extent. And he's arguing, of course, that human life evolves from lower forms of life to higher forms of life over long periods of time. And that the traits that allow you to, if you have an advantageous trait, you can run fast, that will help you to survive, so you can have more children, so that trait will be passed down, and then your species will prosper. So there's this idea of progress. It sounds really nice at first, because this is this idea things will keep progressing, things will keep getting better, and so forth. However, there's also kind of a dark side. It's this idea of survival of the fittest. There's no mercy here. If you're fit, you survive. If you aren't fit, you die. That's kind of the part that would really bother people and disturb people. So, and it's going to challenge religious people in two ways. One is because it offers an alternate understanding of how human beings come to be. But another example is it challenges religious ideas of morality. Right? Religious people see the universe as primarily moral. Right? God is good. He made the universe. So the universe must, in some certain degree, be good. But this is saying that the universe is a cruel place where, you either survive or you don't. So that's this idea of evolution, that there's this conflict between different species, and the fittest survive. And also you have progress through this competition. Now, social Darwinism is the ideas of Charles Darwin applied to human societies. So we're going to take this and apply it to human beings. So instead of saying, these different species, or this bird is competing with this squirrel over who's going to eat the most nuts. Instead of saying that, it's saying these Koreans are against these Japanese, and they are against the Russians, and they're competing with each other. And whichever one of them wins is going to be the fittest, right? Or sometimes people even understood this. They understood it racially. They would say, well, Indians, American Indians, red people. They use that term, red people. They were defeated. They were unfit. So they kind of had it coming. It was their own fault. They should have had their act together. And that's not me saying that. That's what a social Darwinist would say. So it's applying this idea of survival of the fittest to human societies. Now that kind of makes you nervous, right? If that idea is true, it means what's going to happen to our country? Or as they would sometimes say, what's going to happen to our race, right? We need to be strong or we're going to be destroyed. We need to be strong or we're going to be destroyed in this contest. So you had these people who believed in eugenics. We can improve our society, we can build our country and make it stronger by improving our population. Right? We can make our country stronger by improving our population, and we can guide human evolution that way. right? So for example, we want people that have the best traits to reproduce, so we'll encourage people who are healthy and smart to marry and have children. In contrast, people who